In last week's video, we looked at one of the biggest local events to impact Port Huron in 1940. That was a world premiere of Mickey Rooney's Young Tom Edison. And we left off with the parade. But the parade wasn't the only thing that the folks did to get into the spirit of things. They all dressed, or most all of them, dressed in period costumes. This group here is the female employees of the Michigan National Bank. And you can tell this photo was taken at the bank because in the background you can see the signage for new accounts. And the men didn't get away scot-free either. They had to dress up as well, and here you can see them in some of their fine period costumes. And I'm sure there were many contests in Port Huron, as shown by this photograph in the Times Herald. Best dressed. And this fellow here got his picture in the paper for being a dignified dandy. Quite impressive. Once the parade was over, the folks went on to the next big event, and that was waiting the train arrival that carried the dignitaries and, of course, Mickey Rooney. So they hurried down to the old Fort Gratiot station, and it was very cold. It was all in the 20s. Back on that day, but that didn't dampen their enthusiasm at all. There was quite a big crowd there. The train that they'd be waiting for is right here, the Sam Hill. That's the name of the engine. It was named Sam Hill because Henry Ford, his favorite engineer, was named Sam Hill, and so he named it after him. It also says on here, this is the train on which Mr. Edison rode. Of course, that's not the case. It was a train that was similar to that. And even if you were a celebrity, a VIP, you still needed a ticket to get on the train. And this is what that ticket looked like. And I think somebody had a sense of humor. You see that stamp up in the left-hand corner. It's not good. After 78 years from February 10th, 1862, which would put that time the day after the train arrived in Port Huron. Passengers boarded in Detroit. And as you can see from this chart, they retraced the same route that Edison had traveled many times as a boy, selling the candy and apples and whatever else he had. And I think originally it was supposed to be a straight-through route from Detroit to Port Huron, but then they start getting letters like this one right here from the New Haven businessmen. They wrote, "We as members of the New Haven businessmen are very desirous of having the Henry Ford Edison train stop at New Haven on its trip from Detroit to Port Huron for the premiere of Young Tom Edison. We will build a program around the presentation of a basket of apples to young Edison, Mickey Rooney, by the son of John Lemon, as it was Edison and John Lemon who were rivals in selling apples to the passengers on the early Grand Trunk trains. We feel proud of the fact that our community was so closely related to Edison's boyhood. Please consider this carefully and have the train stop yours very truly." And so the stops were made along this route, with each stop claiming some connection to the great Edison. The connection in Fraser was his deafness. It says of deafness that Edison resulted from an incident in which another train man dragged the youth onto the train by the ears. It happened at the station of Fraser, not far from Mount Clemens. Edison had been slow in getting aboard and was in danger of falling under the rolling wheels. As he was drawn up, something in his ears seemed to snap, and deafness followed. At his next stop in Mount Clemens, the connection was this. A boxcar was separated from the train at Mount Clemens and shunted backward toward the baggage car. Under its own momentum, it rode toward the main track. Edison glanced down and saw to his horror that little Jimmy McKenzie, age 3, son of the station master, was directly in the path of the oncoming car. He tossed aside his basket of papers and sprang for the top. A few seconds' delay might have resulted in the unguarded child being crushed. The grateful father of the child offered to teach Edison telegraphy, and young Tom eagerly accepted. Here's a photo I found of the Mount Clemens station, taken during the very time period that Edison was coming back and forth from Port Huron and stopping in Mount Clemens. And if you're ever in Mount Clemens, The station is still there today. It's been restored and it's a museum today, so you might want to catch a look and see where Tom Edison learned his telegraphy. The train pulled out of Mount Clemens and headed for New Haven, and we've already looked at New Haven with Tom Edison's arrival and the Apple celebration that they're giving him. And then they moved on to Richmond. Now, Richmond really didn't have much of a connection at all. It says he had some childhood friends there that he made while he was going through town, but a very limited connection in Richmond. While Mickey was on the train, he donned his young Tom Edison outfit and went through the train pretending he was Thomas Edison at a young age, and he was selling the apples and different things that Tom would have sold. And here we see him selling apples to Mrs. Edison. Edison was an amazing entrepreneur, but not only that, an inventor, but he was somewhat of an editor and printer, and according to Walter Winchell, a gossip columnist. Walter Winchell said this in his column: "Among the many inventions of Edison, the modern gossip column has never been considered. But many decades before today's flourishing dispensers of personal secrets found an eager following, young Tom Edison undertook a brief venture in publishing items about Port Huron people. He discontinued his weekly Herald in favor of a sheet specializing in gossip. He called it Paul Pry. If one man sold another a bulky horse, if a lovesick swain called too often on his sweetheart, or if a wife spent too much on clothes, the young rascal printed the information. People bought the paper to see what it said about their neighbors and found something in it about themselves. Edison ducked behind wagons when he saw them coming. One man, angry after reading a bit about himself, was too quick for young Edison, and catching him by the coat tail threw him into the St. Clair River. Soon after, Edison gave up being a Walter Winchell." Those folks from my generation remember Walter Winchell, listening to the radio programs that he was on. His newspaper column was syndicated in over 2,000 newspapers worldwide, and he was read by 50 million people a day from 1920s until the early 1960s. His Sunday night radio broadcast was heard by another 20 million people from 1930 to the late 1950s. But Winchell was pretty full of himself, as you can tell from the article where he compared himself to Edison, or vice versa. He was also ruthless. He would not hesitate, if he did not like you, to ruin your career or ruin your business just by his radio program. And he had a unique delivery. He spoke very quickly. He spoke over 200 words a minute. And Winchell opened his radio broadcast by pressing randomly on a telegraph key, a sound that created a sense of urgency and importance. And for those of you that would like to have an historical flashback, this next video clip is for you.
It's time, America. Time for Walter Winchell. Presented to you by Huron, the precision watch. Huron, the finest watch you can wear. Huron, the finest watch you can give. Brings you the man who gives America the news. Walter Winchell of the New York Daily Mirror and the Washington Post.
Mr. and Mrs. North and South American, all the ships at sea, let's go to press. Dallas, Texas. The Texas special of the Katy line has been wrecked near Royce City, Texas, between San Antone and St. Lou. Several reported killed. Just happened. We may have more on it later. San Juan, Puerto Rico. The Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico is on the march.
That's the way he would open his program. Then he normally closed his program like this, usually taking one last jab at somebody.
And that, Mr. and Mrs. 48, winds up another edition over 400 ABC stations until next Sunday night or next week at the very same time. This is Walter Winchell, who disagrees with Adlai Stevenson's statement that the 4 fears have replaced the 4 freedoms. America, Mr. Stevenson, has more Minutemen than boogeymen. Good night.
Walter Winchell had alienated so many people that at his funeral only one person attended, and that was his daughter, and she probably had to make the arrangements. All right, now where were we? Oh yeah, our next stop was going to be Smith Creek, coming from Detroit on the VIP Mickey Rooney train, and here it is pulling into the Smith Creek station. Of course, Edison's connection to Smith Creek was this is where he got thrown off the train after a mishap in a baggage car where it caught on fire from one of his experiments. Edison got thrown off the train along with all his possessions, including his beloved printing press, which broke to pieces when it hit the railroad platform. This is the engine that Mickey Rooney came to Port Huron on, and this is the railroad station that Edison got tossed off at. The only problem is, when Mickey Rooney stopped at Smith Creek in 1940, the station that Edison got thrown at was no longer here. How can that be, you say? I speak with forked tongue. Well, actually, no, because the photo I'm showing you was actually taken in 1929 during Light's Golden Jubilee, which we'll address in our next video. The final and most important stop next was Port Huron. They arrived about 12:45 in the afternoon to much fanfare. There was quite a crowd there for such cold weather. And there was a band, and there was music and clapping. A pretty excited crowd. And you can see in the background the Port Huron station. Looks pretty good. But originally, before this, it wasn't in that great a shape. It was used as a yard office just around the Peerless Mint. And they did some work on it. As the band played on, the people were very anxious to see Mickey Rooney depart from the car so they could see him. And finally, when that happened, they broke out in applause when he showed up on the rear deck of the observation car. And here you can see him on that deck. Quite a crowd closed in around him. Some people were trying to shake his hand, as you can see here. But people were quite satisfied once they got to see him, I think. And Mickey jumped into a car, and a convertible, no less, in 20-degree weather, but people got to see him that way, which was quite pleasant for them. When you see photos taken, you always see Mickey in the company of Port Huron VIPs or MGM VIPs, but actually Mickey had brought a friend with him, this gal right here. Her name was never found out, but and we can't really speculate on their relationship, but it's kind of interesting. She always stayed in the background. From the train station, Mickey headed for the Harrington Hotel, where of course they had rooms, and they also had to be at an event that afternoon. That event was held at the Harrington Hotel at 2 o'clock with the We Knew Edison Club luncheon in the Hotel Harrington, with Mickey Rooney and other notables and newspaper men as guests. This will be the only chance to hear noted guests speak. Luncheon will be followed by an informal reception and buffet in the hotel. Mickey Rooney and other guests and newspaper will attend. The luncheon was held in this room here, which is the dining room at the Harrington. It was held up front by the fireplace. That's where the table was for the VIPs. And in this photo here, you can see Mrs. Edison being honored with a bouquet of flowers. The next event on that day's schedule is the world premiere of young Tom Edison. A lot of folks think that the premiere was only at the Desmond Theater, but it was also at the Family and Majestic theaters, as you can see here. I believe the Desmond Theater was by invitation only, and I believe the others was open to the public. And the Desmond could have been open to the public on whatever seats they had left over. And in this newspaper article, you can see the time schedule for all 3 theaters. At 7 o'clock, they had the world premiere of the movie at the Family, and at 7:30 at the Majestic, and at 8 o'clock, it was at the Desmond. And according to this newspaper article, Mickey Rooney made an appearance at all 3 theaters. It says here he left the hotel through the back door to avoid the huge crowd outside and entered the Family, Majestic, and Desmond theaters through stage entrances. Of course, the Desmond Theater was where it was all happening. You can see the searchlights crisscrossing the sky near the Desmond, and you can also see the crowds outside the Desmond Theater. Here's a little better photo of the Desmond Theater along with the marquee advertising the world premiere of the movie. And you can see the crowd there. And as we go up near the roof line, look at that head at the very top there. I think that's quite unique. I don't really ever remember seeing it, so it may not have been there forever, but is there in this photo. And if we look closely at the front of the theater, we see the structure looks like an awning there. That was never there normally. This was strictly for the premiere. And you can see it looks like the usher stood out here and collected the tickets before they went in. The tickets for both the letter and the luncheon were sent out in a letter like this, where they show that they're enclosing those tickets. The only problem with this is I would assume they were mailed to people, but when you look at the date, February 8th, and the premiere is February 10th, I didn't leave a lot of time, so I'm not sure how they got them. Inside the theater, the crowd was at full capacity. According to this chart, roughly 1,300 people were there. The folks were all seated in their period costumes, waiting for the movie to start, and then the opening curtain. Young Tom Edison. If you want to see the complete trailer of this movie, just go to part 11 of my series, and it's on that one. There was another event that was to take place that day, and that was the dedication of what was to be a permanent memorial to Thomas Edison in Port Huron. And that was a 50,000 watt light bulb to celebrate the invention that he created. Mrs. Edison is shown here lighting the 50,000 watt incandescent lamp near the Chamber of Commerce building, which she dedicated as a memorial to her husband. And from this photo here, you can get a pretty good idea where it is today. You can see the Desmond Theater in the background, along with the gas station that was right alongside of it, lit up. And this is where this piece of history would have taken place, right along here in the corner. That's where the old Chamber of Commerce building used to be. The memorial we've been looking at is actually a replica. It was going to be a permanent monument with that bulb put on top of the permanent pedestal at a later date. And according to this drawing here, it wasn't going to be overly large. Whatever happened to that light, I don't know. I had never heard any more about it, never saw any other pictures where it was taken on a permanent basis, located somewhere in Port Huron. Menlo Park, which was where Edison's laboratories were and most of his inventions occurred, put up a very similar idea in the tower with the light on top, and has since been replaced with a newer tower, but it's a beautiful tower. How nice it would have been if Port Huron would have something like this near Edison's home, near the St. Clair River, and could have also been a navigational guide as well at night. But that wasn't to be. In our next video, we'll finish up with the Mickey Rooney Day, Thomas Edison Day, whatever you might want to call it, and we'll mosey on down the block.